Hi, this is Dennis with Second Chance Tackle, and today I have the opportunity to work on a large offshore reel. This is the Shimano Tyrnos 32II. It's a 4-ball bearing trolling reel. It's a lever drag reel. It has two speeds. It has a 5/0 speed and a 2/0 speed, high and low. It's a lever drag reel, and we'll show you how this reel was manufactured, what all the pieces and components are, and what you need to do for a general service, which is what this reel is in for. So a couple of things before we start, especially with a reel this size. I recommend that you take pictures so that you know the order and sequence that you took those pieces and parts out in. Now I'm doing a video. You don't need to do the video. Just stop at critical junctions, take a picture of what the setup looks like so that if you get confused during the reassembly, you'll have a reference point. You can also go out into the web and find the schematic for the reel. In this case, I got this one from Mike's Reel Repair, and it'll show you the exploded view, all the pieces and parts, how the reel comes together. And if you need to order a part, well, the part numbers are on the bottom of the schematic. And if you just need a general orientation, maybe you did forget somewhere along the line what a piece was, well, then you can go back and reference this as well. That's your road map. So we're going to start by taking off the pieces and parts, and I have to start with this one with the handle. And this is probably the only place I get nervous. I guess in the olden days we would say it'd be the heebie-jeebies or something, but this one little part here, this lever point that is the push for the 2-speed, has a spring in it, and you just need to be careful, like you need to be careful with a lot of things. You need to be careful when removing that piece. Well, the first part we're going to take off is the collar. That has 2 screws in it. That's not going to trip the spring in here. You don't have to worry about that. Let's just get that collar out of the way. Those 2 screws will remove that cap. You'll notice that I use a parts tray. This case is a fast food container. It has 2 sides to it, and that's actually, this one works very well for what I'm doing because I keep the handle and exterior components there, and I keep internal components on the other side. Well, here's that mechanism that I'm talking to you about. This has got a compression bar on it. It's got a spring, and that spring moves this lever in and out for the 2-speed lock. Now, you can't take this off without taking this small piece. There's a screw set off in here. And I'll tell you, the only concern I ever have with this spring is losing the spring if it shoots. It's not a matter of reassembling the spring if it pops out. That's easy enough. So pull this up, and you'll see how that spring is oriented there. And you can lift this inner piece from there. The back end of this spring is going up against a piece of a plastic tag here, and it's compressed on a little arm here, so don't worry too much about that. To get this up and out of the way, turn it to the side and then just open it a little bit and it'll come out. That's probably the only way it's going to come out. If you try to bring it up this way, it won't. Here's that spring again, and if you did lose it, just put the back end of the spring in, put the tag end over this arm, and then push up so that it holds itself in that assembly. All right, well, the worrisome part of this reel for me is done. And this reel came in from John. John is a local customer. He fishes in the Atlantic and off the Mideastern seaboard here. This would be used for trolling, probably yellowfin tuna, big striped bass, maybe some sharks and the like, and overall a very nice reel. I just cleaned the grease off of that. Next up then would be the handle removal, and notice that there's 2 things. There's a cup on the back of the handle, and there's a little shim washer inside that cup. So that's all going to go into that place. Now we've got the exposed gear side, and this reel just has more screws than probably anybody would care to admit. You're going to need a micro driver. There's a couple of these that are small. So while I'm taking off some of these exterior screws, I'm going to encourage you to subscribe to my channel. And if you do subscribe, please hit the notification button. It's funny, the last reel I was working on was kind of an ultralight freshwater reel. And then I turn around and I'm working on one of the bigger reels that I get into the shop, a saltwater trolling reel. So you'll see a big variety of reels that I work on. And if you're interested in seeing how reels come apart, come together, understand their uses and the like, well, subscriptions are the best way to do that, and hitting that notification button will let you know when I'm doing a new video, and then you can take the time to see if that's one that would interest you, and if it is, you'll have kind of first notice in terms of that. You did see that I took off that little tie down there because one more screw back here, and those are kind of hard to get working around, but you can work around those two bolts without taking that rod guide off. I'm going to take those two screws, I'm going to place those in one corner of that tray. All right, we're going to continue then. There's 3 more screws that hold down the exterior cover, and then there's a bunch of screws for the interior cover. I keep this together. There's 2 bump guards with screws. I put them in separate corners of my box. And I guess at this point, before I go much further, I can take off the adjuster for the lever drag. And you'll notice I do have 2 parts on my table still. And I'm going to, I'll get back to those in just a moment. Okay, we'll take the middle ring tie down, put that in the same spot that I put the other one. We'll take the far side tie down, and that'll complete the trim ring on the exterior portion. When I took this out, you'll notice that the back of this lever drag adjuster has 2 pieces on it. There are 2 studs on it, pyramid shaped. Those are the ramp that causes the adjuster to go up and down. There's a corresponding ramp here, and when those valleys here have the ramps nestled in them, that's going to give you the free spool. And then as you climb up the ramp with those pyramids, that's going to put the tension onto pulling that lever drag to connect with the discs, and eventually it's going to take them to full drag. All right, components go in here, this goes in here. I nestle the parts back into the parts that have come off. I'm going to put that back on. I don't need that right now, but if I can get it out of harm's way, that's good. And yes, I still do have those 2 pieces there. Why? Because we should be able to take the outer trim ring off now, and that's just sheet metal, if you will. I'm going to take those 2 small screws and I'm going to put them right back where they came from with that shield removed. The reason I do that is we have 2 small sets of screws, one on this side and one on the other side, and they may very well be the same. I think the ones in the back are a little bit longer. I just don't want to confuse them. So if I can put these back, when I go to reinstall, I'll have them right where they belong. All right. You thought we were getting away with something with a few small screws. Nope, there's 6 screws that are the outside of the case, the outside of the inner case. There you go. We're using all the measuring terms in the English language there. And I believe from my experience that these are all the same, but it doesn't hurt to lay them out and see if there's a longer one in there. These are all Phillips head screws. Sometimes you're going to work on a lever drag reel and it's going to have Torx screws. Just have the appropriate tools around. Don't use something that shouldn't be used there. And you'll notice I'm not taking them out side by side or around. I'm kind of holding tension on. There's not a lot of tension on this one. It's not a spring plate like some, but I am kind of just keeping going side to side, alternating, just to, if there was some kind of binding going on in the plate, then this will take care of that. Also, you'll see when I go to put this back together again that I alternate putting the screws back in. Two more. Let's take the one off the bottom. And if you have any questions on this reel or any reel in particular, maybe you're working on one and you come up against a problem, maybe you've got a reel that's got a problem and you're finding it a little difficult to diagnose, if you leave that in the comments section, I will try to respond to you. I do try to respond to questions in the morning. The hardest way to get in touch with me is calling my phone. You'll find that on the business card on the back. Well, when I'm in the shop where I'm doing videos, I can't answer the phone, and a lot of times those calls take much longer to get a response to than a simple message in the comments section, so I would encourage you to do that. There's 6 screws. They're all the same size. These are going to go into my parts tray, all in another corner. With that, we should be able to lift this up now. Notice that there is one more piece here. There's a little Teflon washer, and I'm going to put that right with that free spool lever so that I don't lose it. We should be able to pick this up now, and we'll see 2 sides of this reel. We've got a set here with the drive for one of the gears. That'll come out. We're going to want to clean that. These are beautiful. I believe they're stainless steel gears. And then we have the pinion gear that's going to interface with the second gear. And you just want to note how they go. They go like that. They're nested. And if you put your screwdriver away, you were just a little bit too soon. There's 2 more screws to get to that main gear assembly. And again, this is a 2-speed, so it's going to have 2 gears. I'm going to lay this on the table because we're going to service this gear side and put it back together again before I go to the next step. All right, the 2 come off. This is anchoring the gear assembly. When you take that off, you should be able to just push the whole gear assembly out now. And we can get to the back end of the case first. There's a bearing in here, one of the 4 bearings. There's a bearing here. There's 2 in this side of the case, and then there's 1 on the back side of the case. I'm going to oil bearings. I oil bearings. I don't grease them. I believe that the grease on bearings traps dirt and the like. This case is very clean. Notice here, a good place to take a picture. I haven't seen these things shoot out, but it's certainly possible that it can shoot out. This is your anti-reverse dog setup. We'll show you how to mount that back in when we do this. But that's your back setup, and take a picture. That way you know if you have that thing shoot out on you, that that's the orientation of it. The dog's not going to shoot. That's on an E-clip, but it is possible to lose that spring. Just going to set that off to a side for a moment. Here's your 2 main gears. You have a plastic collar. You have a big gear, plastic collar, small gear, and then you have this little T-type mechanism here. Check the orientations on that as you take that out. You're going to notice that there's one side of the gear is flat, and the other side of the gear has an indented or cut-in to it. And on these gears, the cut-ins face forward, in case you have them on your table and you don't remember which way they went. All right, I'm just going to inspect the gear. I'm going to get a little bit of grease onto that gear. And I believe this is the low gear. It must be the low gear because it's got a smaller face to it, and it's got a bigger drive gear that goes. So this is going to be the low gear. Make sure that your shaft is clean. I'm not quite sure what the grease was that was on here, probably factory grease. I use Penn's Precision Reel Grease. Yeah, it's a Shimano reel. I don't have any problem with the pen greases, so I use them. All right, you mounted that by making sure that you got those two wings through. I'm going to do the same thing with the bigger gear. This would be your high-speed gear. And again, it's a big gear and it's driven by the little gear on the other one. So let's do that. Inspect the teeth, make sure they're clean. These are very clean. I think all the grease just kind of spun out. It either evaporated or spun out here. So we're going to go ahead and use the grease here. Get a goodly amount in there. So we've oiled that back bearing. We're greasing up the main gears. Again, the indented side goes forward. Just like that. And then you're going to want to work it just like that so that you have that wing flush on the back here. Well, that's all you need to do other than a light greasing of that main shaft as we go to reassemble. We're going to put that back in. And I slipped that off. So let's just get that back on. And then one of the things I like to do is just get that handle nut, put that back on there. Kind of hold the assembly. We'll come back and we'll put it the right way, but that'll keep this side from slipping. We take our cover then, we're going to put that back over. And if you find that you're running into any resistance whatsoever in reinstalling the gears or anything, stop. If something is binding, don't try to force it. Make sure that it's properly aligned, and then it goes in easy. If it doesn't go in easy, something's out of alignment. For example, you might be trying to put this cover back on and you may not have that stud in that hole there, and so you got to bind in it. Don't go doing anything rash. Just take a moment, take a deep breath, and put it back together. Well, this is where the other two small screws came from. You can go ahead and put those in at this point as well. Actually, they didn't need to be removed when I was removing the outer trim rings. They could have been removed later. So even though this appears to be out of sequence because I took the trim rings off before, these can go on right now. Okay, we're done with that. We've cleaned up the other gear assembly here, and we can at this point go ahead and re-grease these, but we're not going to go reinstall. That's because there's a little square side to this back drive, and that's kind of hard to get into that next piece in the case there. So I prefer to set this by doing the assembly into the tension ring as opposed to doing it by putting it in here. It could be put in here, and you can measure with that dog, but you can also measure with that dog when you go to reinstall. So we're going to leave that. I'm going to take the business end of the reel out then. That's the driver side of this for the spool and the drag system. Set the case off for a moment. Clean up the back. There's a little bit of dirt here. Be careful. This little crossbar here will come out, and just keep an eye on it. If you hear something fall that you weren't thinking about, it could be that little bar there. We're back to this. I almost feel like a jeweler some days. We're using very small screws here. And I'm going to do the same thing here. I'm going to keep them out of harm's way, but I'm going to take them out so that this cover allows me to get to the drag washer for inspection, and it allows me to get to the bearings for servicing. And we can do what we need to do in terms of the general service. Most of your general service is going to be cleaning, if you have dried grease and the like, And then it's going to be a matter of just lubrication. So take care of the dirt, get it out of the way, get the old greases and oils out of the way, and then go about your business of servicing the reel. Now, of course, you wanted to test that reel before. I didn't do that for the video. I tested it before I put it on my bench. But you do want to make sure that if you have a problem, that you go right to that problem as part of your service as well. This is a pressure plate now. This whole plate is going to come off just like that. There's a little cup that's actually holding that in. This is just the carrier here. This is your pressure plate. You need to make sure that this plate is clean and not scarred. Underneath that we have the drag washer. Drag washer's fine. We have two bearings. We have a top bearing and a bottom bearing. The top bearing is actually going to sit in the cup here. And then on the other side here, we're going to take these two screws out, because there's one more bearing here that you do want to oil. There's a bearing and a series of tension washers in this side. So you want to pay attention there. It looks like this reel's never been serviced because it still has the original Loctite on those set screws there. So I'm going to say that the greases that we saw in here are original to the reel. You should just be able to pull this assembly out now. And that's what I wanted to get to, the shaft. So I've pulled the shaft out. A couple of notes here. Just clean it up. That's what you want to do. Here's your bearing and a couple of tension washers underneath. You don't need to change the sequence of that unless you would want to change the flexibility or the variability of the lever drag tensioning. There is an E-clip in the middle of this. You just want to check the cavity, make sure it's clean, and you can run a paper towel in there for mop-up duty if you like. Underneath we have the one washer. We're probably going to pop that out when we go to reinstall that lever. And again, I oil the bearings. I don't grease them. And then on the table here we have the mainspring and the bearing piece. Okay, just a light coat of grease onto the shaft here. Come on in from underneath. As I mentioned, we probably would push that bearing out, and we did. And that bearing can be reinstalled. And the first thing you want to do is get this cup back on here. Now, it's dangerous to leave your screws on a desk. I do have a series here, but as I mentioned, I knew I'm taking this right off. I knew what I was doing, putting them back. I did keep them out of harm's way. They are so easy when you have these small screws to knock them on the floor or knock them off the immediate work area, and then, well, I'll be spending some time looking for them. So just be careful. Doesn't hurt to put them into the parts tray. I've done this a few times now. Kind of knew where they are, and I knew I was going right back with them. That's why I've left them there. Okay, see, I mentioned that one will that's a floating pin, and that needs to be in a T position on both sides so that this can get mounted back into the back end of the reel. Okay, one is in. You do not need to grease that washer. That washer is a Carbon-Tex washer, I believe. Just keep it dry. Make sure that you can see the cross hatching on it. You can, which means it's in good condition. And then bearing, spring, bearing, pressure plate. That's all it takes to service the back end of this reel. Collar. Line it up so that those little screw holes are around. And those of you that know me and know reels and watch my channel know that these 6 would normally be a little bit of a challenge. The only advantage I have here, well, it's that there's an offset in that plate that's going to hold that screw for the starting point. If that had to be a flat mesh in there, well, we would probably would shut the camera off and we would move on. So if you're like John, if you have some reels that need to be serviced, don't feel like doing them yourself, or maybe you, like me, kind of get a little nervous with those springs in there, you can send me an email. Use the address on the business card that follows. I will be happy to provide you with the information on my service and repair fees and how to get the reels to me and things like that. All right, there's 2 more of these. I'm looking at my timing on this video, and I know my camera is going to shut off in about a minute and a half. So I'm going to shut it off right now. We'll restart a video and come back, and we'll finish the assembly of that reel. Okay, that's called preventive maintenance there. I just did one on a Roddy spinning reel. Forgot to do that, and I missed a step being recorded. I didn't miss a step, but I missed the step being recorded. All right, all of those are done. They're tightened down. This is where I want to take this piece. It's a square or an oblong. And you'll notice that there's a square set in here. Well, if you had installed this into the other case, meeting these two up is very difficult. Just the mesh just is hard to do. It's hard to do here without knowing what I'm trying to do, I guess. There you go. So we're flush. So that's why I prefer to put this one in on this side. Same thing here. Make sure that that gets in and meshed. And then we're ready for reinstall. We're going to take the back end of the case here. You'll notice that there is a T that corresponds with the T on the back of the spool. Again, if it slips, make sure that it's set up that way. Put the spool in and then turn it until you have a flush side here. That way you know the T is in that slot. Come on over and take your case now. Everything's been all greased and oiled. We just want to put the case in. Now that dog is probably not going to set up right away. This is where you want to take the moment and spin the reel. I just used that knob. Spin the reel, and you can see it's going to pull the case in. So our dog is set properly now. We can go ahead and put those side plate screws in. And for those paying attention, you already know what I'm going to do here. I'm going to alternate positioning of the screws that I put in so that I keep an equal pressure on the side plate. I'm going to start at the top. And I'm going to go bottom right. These are all machine screws. They're not rough thread. And I'm going to go to the other side. And if this is slow and boring, go get a cup of coffee. Shimano made their best efforts to tighten this reel down. They put a lot of screws in here, and unfortunately they didn't think of the guy doing the video showing how to repair it. It was going to take a minute or two to put them all back in. People ask me, can you use a mechanical screwdriver on these? I do not recommend that. Those mechanical screwdrivers come with a lot of torque, and if you over torque one of these, you risk having the case shatter on you. So I don't recommend it. So let's just say words of caution. If you want to do that, go right ahead. Just know that I don't prefer to do the mechanicals. If you do, if your hands are arthritic or maybe you have some other issues and you need the assist of the mechanical, please don't tighten it down all the way. Leave it short. We'll show you on this one. Leave it short or proud. Sometimes it's referred to as proud. Leave it proud. And then finish the tightening of it the last turn or two. So bring your mechanical screwdriver to about here so that you still have a gap behind it and no risk of breaking the case, and then finish it by hand the last few turns. Well, we just have one more to go. So let's get that last one in, and then we'll show you how to finish the outer case. We'll give it a test, and hopefully we've done everything correct, and John can get this one back out there fishing for the tuna and striped bass and whatever's running in his neighborhood. All right, those are the 6 outer screws. You're going to remember I did leave the 2 small screws in the case, so I can't get that outer piece of sheet metal on there without taking those 2 out. Let's go ahead and do that now. Now I can get the bezel. Put that on, and the first 2 screws I'm going to put back in. Well, you guessed it, it's the small ones because I don't want to knock them around as I'm working with the others. So I'm fortunate. I'm on the mid-Atlantic coast here on the northeast seaboard, and I get to see every kind of reel. I get to see a good amount of freshwater reels. I get to see inshore reels, and I get to see the big ones from offshore, and kind of like the variety in doing all of those, and it makes for a great YouTube channel because, well, not everybody has the same variety of fishing in their spots as I do, and it's always fun to try and meet all of the needs and all of the questions that folks ask along the way. We're going to put the trim ring on. I put the lever on without the internals. Now I'm going to lock down the trim ring by using that middle screw. We have the 2 bumpers, max drag and free spool bumpers. They go on the sides, 1 in each corner opposing. And I'm going to apologize if some of this work seems like it's a little far away. Well, that's what it takes to get into the frame with this camera. So normally I try to do some close-ups. If some of this was a little bit unclear, I'll apologize for that because, well, it's a big reel and it needs a lot of frame. And sometimes these smaller pieces, well, they probably aren't as clear as you would like them to be. Once I do this now, we've got the Teflon washer underneath, we got the carrier. I want to move this all the way over to free spool. You're going to see the 2 valleys here in that carrier. And those 2 valleys are going to be the corresponding offsets, as we talked about a little bit ago. Seems like a whole another conversation, but there's 2 ramps, 2 studs or pyramids here. So this sits in the free spool mode. You want to nest those studs into those valleys. And then we have a spring and we have the nut, and that's where we start. Tighten that down. Okay, only adjust in the free spool mode. Make sure that you have free spool right now. Turn it to a drag position, and we should see the bottom turn now. And you can't see it, I got this too greased, but trust me on this one, that bottom of the reel is turning, and you'll see it more when we do the handle. Bring it back to free spool. Now we're going to assemble that handle side and remove the plunge that sets the 2 speeds together. We have that little Teflon washer inside the cup, copper washer. So the water shield and the washer go on next. The handle would be after that. And then the plunger is also the handle nut. That's a 14mm nut, if I didn't mention it before. Hand tighten it. That reduces the risk of scarring the finish on the handle. And grab your 14mm wrench. Tighten that up. And if that point on the nut is pointing to the hole on the bottom here, there's a good chance that that cover, which has the spring in it, is going to align properly. Well, that's the next challenge. Again, you may have bumped this up. If you bumped it up and the spring came loose, don't worry. Just take a deep breath, put the bottom end of the spring along this plastic tab on the inside, and then push the whole thing down, that will reset it. Remember, we came into that from the side like this, and you do need to push up just a little bit to clear that. And then bring that around. And you should be able to lock in. And we're not locked. You're trying for alignment here. Okay, we want to take the assembly off. We'll show you how to do that again. Push up, then walk it over. And it looks like we're either need to be a little bit tighter or a little bit looser. I have to take this off because I don't have the hand strength to do that on camera and do this at the same time. Let's try this again. Push up, push over, bring it down. Nope, we're probably over tightened at this point. So let's do this one more time. Whoever needs to take lessons in terms of taking this off, well, this is a lot of good practice here. All right. And this is just trial and error. Looks like I've been making more errors than trials here. Okay. Well, we were saying all along about that spring shooting. That spring just shot. So let's show you how to reinstall. The good news is that I do have it aligned. So there you go. Be an optimist here. Okay. So this comes out just like that. Spring goes in here like that. Grab the tab and set it inside the, well, I have to put it on there first. Just like that. Load that spring. And then kind of guide it in so that it rests up against that plastic piece. Push in. Now you've got that spring compressed, and make sure it's down. Now the good news is that that is lined up. So let's just do this one more time. Hopefully one more time. Now I have the hole aligned for that small tie-down screw. And as I said earlier, this is the one little thing that I don't like, because that spring, well, it was nice to me today, but that spring has wound up in the floor, it's wound up in my tool bag, it's wound up in a box, it's wound up in different places that weren't as kind to me as it was there. Here's your top cover then. And we're almost at a time for a test. So while we're doing this, I want to just take a moment to reach out and thank the first responders, essential personnel, everybody in uniform, keeping us safe during the pandemic. Your efforts truly are appreciated. Thank you for all you do. All right, we're in free spool. We have a beautifully gliding spool. That's a result of the cleanup and all of the fresh oils and greases. When we trip to the first strike, now you can see that the handle is turning. And then you can go to max drag, and you're there. You want to check. I'm going to just back this up a little bit. You want to check to make sure that you have a stop on your 2-speed. You're in. You're running at that second speed, and then to trip it back out, you push your button, and that releases. So that's it. That is the Tyrnos 30, number 2, II, 4-ball bearing, lever drag, saltwater, big reel for trolling, for big fish, and it's a Shimano product. So I hope you've enjoyed that. To everybody, please stay safe, stay well, and stay watching. This is Dennis with Second Chance Tackle. Have a great day.